She only wanted to escape her debts. One night, one mistake, one dangerous bargain. But when Zara, a young African woman struggling to survive in South Korea, crosses paths with Daejun, the ruthless mafia boss who rules the city's underworld, her life is ripped apart and rebuilt in blood, obsession, and desire. What begins as a desperate trade spirals into a suffocating bond she can't untangle, where love feels like a cage and freedom could cost her everything. Now, Zara must decide. Risk her soul in his dangerous embrace, or fight for survival in a world that wants her dead. Will Zara break free, or will she be consumed by the man who refuses to let her go? Watch the full story now, only here on Jenny's Drum World. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next dark, thrilling tale. Zara's shoes slapped against the wet pavement, echoing through the narrow alleyways of Seoul. The city was alive with neon lights, the hum of cars, and chatter from late-night diners, but none of it reached her. All she could feel was the weight pressing down on her chest, the crushing burden of debt, the relentless fear of the men who wanted her money, and the constant exhaustion of trying to survive. Her life in South Korea hadn't been easy. She had arrived full of hope, ready to make her mark, to find opportunity in a place so different from the home she had left behind. But reality had been harsher than any dream she had carried. Bills piled up faster than she could pay them. Jobs, 2, sometimes 3 at a time, kept her moving, but the money never lasted long enough to keep the collectors at bay. The irony stung, working day and night, yet still feeling as if she were drowning. Tonight, the fear was worse than usual. She had narrowly escaped a confrontation with her debt collectors earlier, a group of men who didn't care about her life or the circumstances that led her into debt. They cornered her behind a dark convenience store, their voices sharp and threatening. One of them had leaned close, pressing a finger to her chest. "Next time," he had said, eyes glinting with menace, "we won't be so polite." The memory of their sneering faces sent a chill down her spine. She pressed her hands to her temples, trying to block out the fear, but it was relentless, crawling into her mind and making her tremble. She couldn't run forever, and she couldn't work herself out of this hole. Every safe street seemed unsafe, every passerby potentially a threat. Survival, she realized, required a choice she had been dreading. There was only one person in the city who could offer a real way out: Daejun. Even speaking his name made her stomach twist. He was infamous, a man who controlled Seoul's underworld with ruthless efficiency. People whispered his name in fear, and sometimes in awe. Businesses, street gangs, even corrupt officials bent to his will. Zara had seen him once, in a dimly lit club while delivering packages, and the memory haunted her. He had been sitting alone, calm, almost predatory. His gaze had found hers across the crowded room, sharp and unflinching. It was impossible to look away. It was impossible not to feel small, exposed, yet strangely drawn to the danger he represented. Now, desperation had pushed her to the point where fear alone could not hold her back. She knew what going to him meant. Help from Daejun was never free. It came with a cost, a price she wasn't sure she could pay, but one she might be forced to accept. The streets seemed darker as she walked toward the building where he was rumored to operate, a quiet, nearly abandoned structure tucked between larger, brightly lit office buildings. She gripped her bag tightly, as if it could shield her from the danger she knew awaited inside. Each step felt heavier, each breath more labored. Her mind raced, trying to imagine all possible outcomes, all ways this could go wrong. When she reached the entrance, the air smelled faintly of smoke and old leather, and the metal door groaned as she pushed it open. Inside, silence greeted her, thick and expectant. The dim light barely illuminated the hall, casting long shadows that twisted like dark fingers across the walls. She stepped inside, every nerve on edge, and found him waiting. Of course he was waiting. Daejun leaned casually against the wall, his posture relaxed, but there was a danger in him that made her pulse quicken. His dark eyes caught hers immediately, studying her as though he could see every secret she tried to hide. "Zara," he said, his voice low and measured, with an undertone of amusement. "I hear you have a problem." Her throat tightened. Words stuck, but finally she managed to speak. I need your help, she said, voice trembling despite her effort to remain steady. People are after me. My debts. I can't, she trailed off, knowing he didn't need all the details. He could see her desperation without a word. Daejun's eyes narrowed, his lips curving into a faint, sharp smile. Help doesn't come free, he said simply. Zara felt the pit in her stomach twist tighter. She had imagined this moment countless times, what it would be like to face him, to plead for help, but now that she was here, it was worse than she could have imagined. She wanted to run, to turn around and disappear into the city, but she knew that running wasn't an option. Not anymore. I'll do whatever you want, she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. She hated herself for saying them, hated the vulnerability, the humiliation, but the alternative, another encounter with the collectors, was far worse. She could see it clearly now. Beaten, robbed, maybe worse. Survival demanded a price, and she was willing to pay it. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to tighten between them. Zara felt every movement of his body, the slow confidence, the quiet danger. He studied her, silent, until it felt like hours had passed. Finally, he nodded. The night that followed was tense, suffused with fear and something she hadn't expected, connection. Daejun approached her with deliberate care, guiding her to a dimly lit room in the back. Every movement was measured, controlled. He wasn't forcing her, but the air around him was suffocating in its intensity. Zara tried to resist, stepping back, shaking her head. I can't, she whispered. This shouldn't happen. He didn't push her violently. He never had to. There was a magnetic pull in his presence, a dangerous gravity that drew her closer even as she wanted to escape. You don't have to like it, he said softly, but tonight, it's the only way to survive. Do you understand? Her chest tightened, and a wave of conflicting emotions hit her. Fear, disgust, relief, desire she didn't want to admit. Her pride fought against necessity, but the men who had threatened her earlier, the looming threat of debt collectors, made her decision for her. They were close now, the room charged with unspoken tension. His hand brushed against hers, not commanding, but firm, protective. She shivered, torn between instinctive revulsion and a reluctant trust. And then, for a brief moment, all barriers fell away. They held each other close, a fleeting intimacy that left her trembling, vulnerable. There was no explicit lust in it, only closeness, the warmth of human contact in the middle of chaos, a fragile thread of connection amid danger. When it was over, Zara pulled away as quickly as she could, wrapping her arms around herself. Her cheeks burned, her heart raced. She hated the vulnerability she had allowed, hated how his presence still lingered in her skin, her hair, her senses. But she had survived. Her debts were no longer a threat. Daejun's eyes, dark and intense, met hers. Tomorrow night, be here, he said simply, leaving the room before she could answer. Outside, the night air hit her like ice. The city looked different, threatening, alive, and indifferent. Every neon light seemed to flicker a warning. Fear and relief battled inside her chest. She had traded one danger for another, and while her debts were gone, a new, more complex danger had entered her life. Zara walked home slowly, every step heavy with thoughts she couldn't escape. The chain had begun, invisible and binding, forged from necessity, desire, and the looming presence of a man who would not let her go. She clenched her fists, trying to hold onto the little control she had left. Tomorrow night, she would face him again. And she knew, deep down, her life would never be the same. When Zara woke the next morning, the memory of the night before clung to her like smoke, impossible to wash away, no matter how much she tried. She lay in her small rented room, staring at the cracked ceiling, her body heavy with exhaustion but her mind wide awake. It wasn't just the encounter with Daejun that haunted her, though that alone would have been enough. It was the knowledge that she had crossed a line she could never uncross. She had bargained her body for survival, and while the debt collectors were no longer knocking on her door, the price she had paid felt immeasurable. She told herself it was over. One night, One sacrifice, one terrible choice that had bought her freedom. She could put it behind her, return to her life, work her jobs, and pretend none of it had happened. But life doesn't work that way. The first sign came that afternoon at the cafe, where she worked. She was wiping down tables when her boss, a middle-aged man with a perpetual scowl, walked over, his face pale. "Zara," he said, lowering his voice, "someone came by asking about you." Her heart skipped. "Who?" "A man," her boss replied nervously. "Tall. Sharp suit." He said he worked for Daejun. The rag slipped from her hand, falling to the floor. She bent quickly to pick it up, hoping her boss wouldn't see the panic in her eyes. What did he want? Her boss hesitated. "Just to know your schedule." Her chest tightened. Daejun. She had given him one night, nothing more. So, why was he sending men to track her? That evening, when she left the cafe, a black car was parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, but she didn't need to see inside to know who had sent it. She walked quickly in the opposite direction, pretending she hadn't noticed. But the car didn't move. It just waited, watching. By the time she reached her tiny apartment, Zara's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She locked the door, slid the bolt, and leaned against it, her breath shaking. She told herself she was imagining things, that paranoia was playing tricks on her. But then her phone buzzed. A new message. "Your debts are gone. Don't worry about the collectors anymore." No name, but she didn't need one. The weight of those words should have brought relief. Instead, it sank into her like a stone. She typed a shaky reply. "Thank you. But that's all, right? It's done now." The 3 blinking dots appeared. Then his answer. "Nothing is done. I don't let go of what's mine." Zara's stomach dropped. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, but she held it tightly instead, staring at the words until they blurred. She wasn't free. She had just traded chains. The days that followed proved it. At the cafe, she caught glimpses of men she didn't recognize sitting near the window, their eyes following her every move. At her delivery job, a sleek car seemed to appear at every corner she turned, always keeping distance, but never far behind. And then there was the night Daejun himself appeared. She was closing the cafe alone, the lights dim and the street outside quiet. As she locked the door, she felt it, the heavy weight of someone's presence. She turned, and there he was. Daejun leaned casually against the lamppost, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. The glow of the streetlight cast sharp shadows across his face, making him look both unreal and dangerous. "You work too much," he said calmly. Her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" "I told you," he said, stepping closer. "Nothing is done." Zara backed away instinctively, her hand tightening on her bag. That wasn't the deal. It was one night. That's all. He studied her, his dark eyes catching every flicker of fear, every tremble in her voice. One night was not enough. His voice was quiet, but it held a weight that pinned her in place. "You intrigue me, Zara. You're not like the others. You don't bow, you don't beg. You fight. I like that." Her chest rose and fell quickly. "I'm not yours," she whispered fiercely, though her voice betrayed the fear burning through her. A faint, dangerous smile touched his lips. "We'll see." He left her then, slipping into the shadows as suddenly as he'd appeared. But his presence lingered, heavy and suffocating, even after he was gone. Nights became harder. Sleep eluded her, replaced by memories of his eyes, his voice, his touch. What unsettled her most wasn't just the fear. It was the part of her that remembered the way he had held her that night, the way his presence had both terrified and protected her. The part of her that longed for human closeness, even from a man as dangerous as him. She hated herself for it. One evening, after a long day, she returned to her apartment to find a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a phone, sleek and new. The screen lit up instantly with a message. "Use this. Only with me." She wanted to throw it away, but instead she found herself clutching it, staring at the glowing screen. She told herself it was fear that made her keep it. But deep down, she knew it wasn't only fear. The chemistry between them grew in stolen moments. The nights he appeared outside her workplace. The times she caught his men watching her from a distance, only for her to realize they were there not to threaten her, but to protect her from anyone else who might. Once, when a drunken man grabbed her wrist outside the cafe, one of Daejun's men appeared out of nowhere, shoving the man back so hard he stumbled into the street. "Boss won't like anyone touching what's his," the man muttered before disappearing. Zara stood frozen, her wrists still tingling. She wanted to scream, to fight back against this invisible cage tightening around her. But the truth was undeniable. She felt safer knowing no one else could hurt her. And that safety came at a price she wasn't sure she could refuse. The breaking point came one late evening when Daejun showed up at her apartment uninvited. Zara opened the door to find him standing there, calm as if he belonged. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I told you," he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I don't let go of what's mine." Her pulse raced as he stood close, his presence filling the small room. She should have pushed him away, demanded he leave. But instead, she froze, caught in the pull of his dark eyes. There was no violence in his touch when he brushed a strand of hair from her face, no force in the way he tilted his head to study her. But the weight of his control was undeniable. "You can fight me all you want," he murmured. "But you'll learn something, Zara. The more you resist, the tighter the chain becomes." Her breath caught. She hated him. She feared him. And yet, part of her heart pounded with something else. Something that blurred the line between resistance and desire, between fear and longing. That night, as he finally left, Zara collapsed onto her bed, burying her face in her hands. She thought she had escaped death, but now she realized the truth. She hadn't escaped at all. She had only traded one trap for another. And this trap had a name, Daejun. Zara had never imagined her life would take this turn. 1 month ago, she was juggling shifts at a cafe, delivering parcels on the subway, and scraping coins together to pay bills. Now she was standing in a silk dress under the blinding lights of a chandelier, surrounded by men with knives hidden in their suits and women with secrets painted on their lips. This wasn't her world. It was Daejun's, a world of power, fear, and danger. The party was held in a private club, the kind of place she would never have been allowed into on her own. Gold-trimmed walls, velvet curtains, and expensive liquor lined every table. The air smelled of perfume, smoke, and money. Laughter rose and fell, but beneath it ran a current of tension, like electricity waiting to spark. Zara clutched her small purse tightly, wishing she could disappear into the floor. She hadn't wanted to come. She had begged Daejun to leave her out of this. But he had simply said, "If you're mine, you need to see what comes with me." And as always, he left no room for argument. He stood near the center of the room, surrounded by men in dark suits who leaned toward him with hushed voices. Daejun was calm, collected, every movement precise. But Zara had learned to see the sharpness under that calm, the predator watching everything, ready to strike. When his eyes met hers from across the room, her stomach tightened. He didn't smile. He rarely did. But there was a glimmer there, something that almost looked like pride, as if bringing her here proved something. She hated that part of her responded to it. The night grew darker, and so did the mood. Zara had drifted to a quieter corner, sipping a drink she didn't like, when she felt it, the shift in the air. A group of men entered, and the hum of conversation faltered. These weren't allies. One of them, tall with a scar across his cheek, looked directly at Daejun. The tension snapped like glass. Within seconds, voices rose. Harsh words exchanged in Korean too fast for Zara to fully catch. Chairs scraped back, hands reached inside jackets. Her heart pounded. She froze, her eyes darting to Daejun. He didn't flinch. Instead, he moved with terrifying calm, placing a hand on the table before him and leaning forward. His voice was low, sharp and final. And then chaos erupted. A glass shattered, men lunged, fists and knives flashing under the lights. Someone screamed. Zara stumbled back, her pulse racing, as the crowd split into a frenzy. 2 men crashed into the table near her, sending her drink flying. She ducked, pressing against the wall, trying to make herself invisible. But then one of the rival men's eyes landed on her. For a heartbeat, she saw the thought flicker in his gaze. She was leverage. He lunged toward her. Zara gasped, pressing back as hard as she could, but before the man's hand touched her, Daejun was there. The movement was a blur. Daejun's hand gripping the man's wrist, twisting hard, his other fist slamming into his jaw. The man crumpled to the floor. Daejun turned, his dark eyes locking onto Zara. For once, his mask of control slipped, and she saw it. Fear. "Stay down," he barked, his voice sharp with something more than anger. Zara sank to the floor, trembling, as the fight raged around them. She covered her ears, her heart thundering so loudly it drowned out everything else. But through the chaos, she kept catching glimpses of him. Daejun moving with brutal precision, protecting his empire, his men, and her. When it was finally over, the rival group had fled, leaving behind broken glass and bloodstains. The music somehow had stopped. Silence fell heavy over the room. Zara rose shakily, her legs weak. Daejun crossed to her immediately, his suit jacket torn, a cut along his cheek. But his eyes were only on her. "Did he touch you?" he demanded, his voice low and furious. She shook her head quickly. No, I'm fine." For a moment, he just stared at her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Then, in front of everyone, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, desperate, as if he had almost lost something he couldn't afford to. Zara stiffened, torn between pushing him away and clinging tighter. She hated the possessiveness in his grip, but she couldn't ignore the truth pulsing in her chest. Part of her felt safe there. Later, when the mess was cleaned and the crowd had thinned, Zara found herself alone with him in his private office. He sat in silence, cleaning the cut on his cheek, his reflection sharp in the mirror. She watched him, her thoughts tangled. "You didn't have to bring me here," she whispered finally. His gaze met hers in the mirror. "Yes, I did. If they see you, they know you're under my protection." Her arms wrapped around herself. "Or they see me as your weakness." He turned then slowly, setting the cloth aside. "You are not my weakness, Zara." He stood, walking toward her with steady steps. "You are the reason I fight harder." Her breath caught. There was something raw in his voice, something that didn't fit the cold, ruthless image she had known. In that moment, she saw a glimpse of the man behind the mask, the scars not just on his skin but carved deep into his soul. And it terrified her, because she was beginning to care. The days that followed blurred. Zara was pulled deeper into his world. Lavish dinners where politicians whispered favors into Daejun's ear. Meetings in dimly lit rooms where money and threats exchanged hands. And always, men watching her, guarding her, making sure no one else dared approach. But she also saw things no one else did. She saw him late at night, alone in his office, his head bowed over old photographs. She saw the scars on his chest when his shirt slipped open, and when she asked, he only said, "The cost of power." She saw the way he drank quietly, not to celebrate, but to numb something inside. Loneliness clung to him, no matter how many people bowed at his feet. Against her better judgment, Zara's heart softened. She told herself it was madness, that she couldn't care for a man who had chained her life to his. But the more she saw his hidden wounds, the harder it became to deny it. And then came the night that changed everything. She was walking home from the cafe when the air shifted again, that cold prickle of danger crawling up her spine. Before she could turn, hands grabbed her, dragging her into a dark alley. Her scream was muffled by a rough hand over her mouth. "We told him he'd pay," a voice hissed in her ear. "Now he'll pay through you." Panic surged. She fought, clawing, kicking, but the men were stronger. Her heart hammered with one thought. This is it. This is how it ends. Then headlights cut through the alley. Tires screeched. A black car slammed to a stop. Daejun. His men were out in seconds, guns drawn, shouting. The attackers scattered, but one held her tightly, pressing a knife against her side. "Back off, or she dies," he yelled. The world narrowed to the blade at her ribs, the cold grip of the man holding her, and Daejun standing just a few feet away. His face was stone, but his eyes burned with fire. "Let her go," Daejun said, his voice calm, too calm. "Or what?" the man snarled. Zara trembled, tears stinging her eyes. And then, in a blur too fast for her to follow, Daejun moved. A shot rang out. The knife clattered to the ground. The man collapsed. Zara stumbled free, her body shaking uncontrollably. Daejun caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair, though his voice trembled with fury. "I won't let anyone touch you." Zara buried her face in his chest, her heart torn apart by fear and something far more dangerous, the realization that she was falling for him. She didn't want to. She knew it was reckless, maybe even suicidal. But her heart no longer listened to reason. She was entangled, and there was no way out. The rain fell hard against the glass windows of Daejun's penthouse, each drop running like a tear across the city lights. Zara stood there, her reflection ghosting over the skyline of Seoul. She hugged her arms tight around her body, though the room was warm. The weight of everything pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. For weeks, she had been caught in a storm that wasn't hers. Lavish parties, brutal confrontations, whispered threats in dimly lit rooms. Daejun's world had swallowed her whole. At first, she thought it was only about debts and desperation. But now, she wasn't so sure. Behind her, she felt his presence before she even heard him. Daejun. Always looming, always watching. He stepped closer, his footsteps quiet but heavy with intent. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low, almost calm. Yet there was an edge to it, sharp as a blade. Zara didn't turn around. "I've just been thinking." "About what?" He moved closer, his warmth brushing her back. His hand slid around her waist, but she stiffened. "About whether this us is real," she whispered. "Or if I'm just another possession you've chained down." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the thunder rolling over the city. Then his voice quieter now. "You think I see you as a possession?" Zara finally turned to face him. His dark eyes bored into hers, unreadable yet intense. "You don't let me breathe without you watching me. You cancel my debts. You save me from collectors. You protect me from your enemies. But you never ask what I want. You only decide. For me. About me." Her voice cracked. "That's not love, Daejun. That's a cage." Something flickered in his expression. Pain? Anger? She couldn't tell. "You think I'd let you walk away? After everything?" he asked, stepping closer until there was no space between them. "Zara, I could have any woman I want. But I chose you. Do you know why?" She shook her head, afraid of the answer. "Because you're not afraid of me. Not really. You fight me. You make me feel alive in a way nothing else does. That's why I can't let you go." Zara's chest tightened. His words were intoxicating, but they terrified her, too, because deep down, a part of her believed him. That night, she lay awake long after he fell asleep beside her. His arm was heavy around her waist, his breath steady against her neck. But her mind raced. Could she really live like this, protected but suffocated? Loved, but possessed? When dawn broke, Zara slipped out of bed and moved quietly through the apartment. She had to decide. Freedom, even if it meant danger, or Daejun's world, where love felt like chains. She reached the door. Her fingers trembled as she touched the handle. "Going somewhere?" His voice froze her blood. She turned slowly. Daejun stood in the shadows, his face unreadable, but his eyes sharp with hurt. "Daejun," she began, but he cut her off. "You are going to run." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't live like this. I can't live in your shadow, always afraid, always waiting for the next fight, the next enemy. I need to choose my own life." His jaw clenched. "And what life will that be, Zara? Running from debt collectors again? From men who see you as weak prey? At least with me, you're safe." "Safe isn't the same as free," she whispered. His hands curled into fists, but then slowly released. He took a step toward her, his voice breaking for the first time. "If you leave, you'll destroy me." Her heart cracked. He wasn't the ruthless mafia boss in this moment. He was just a man, terrified of losing the only thing he couldn't buy or control. But fate didn't give them time to decide. The door exploded inward, splintering off its hinges. Gunfire roared. Zara screamed as masked men stormed the apartment, weapons raised. Rival Mafia. Daejun shoved her to the ground and pulled his gun from his jacket, firing back without hesitation. The room erupted in chaos. Bullets slicing through glass, the sound of shattering windows, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. Zara crawled across the floor, heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear anything else. "Stay down," Daejun shouted, his voice raw with fury. She looked up and saw him. Blood on his shoulder, his teeth gritted as he kept firing, determined to protect her even as his enemies closed in. Something twisted deep inside her chest. For all his flaws, for all his suffocating control, he was risking everything for her. One of the masked men spotted her crawling and raised his gun. Zara froze, her breath caught in her throat. But before the shot could fire, Daejun lunged in front of her, taking the bullet to his side. He went down hard, groaning, his blood staining the white floor. "No!" Zara cried, scrambling to his side. The attackers fled as sirens wailed in the distance, leaving chaos behind. Zara pressed her hands against his wound, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave me like this." His hand gripped hers weakly, blood smearing her skin. He looked at her with eyes full of pain and something softer, something real. "Now you see why I can't let you go." Hours later, in the hospital, Zara sat by his bed. He was alive but pale, hooked to machines. She held his hand, staring at him as he slept. She realized the truth then. Her feelings weren't simple. They weren't black and white. She hated his control, yet she loved his fire. She feared his power, yet she longed for his touch. He was her captor and her savior, her danger and her shelter. And now she had a choice. When he woke, his eyes searched hers, weak but still burning. "Are you leaving me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zara's throat tightened. She leaned closer, brushing her fingers against his. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "But I do know this. You don't own me, Daejun. If I stay, it's because I choose to, not because you force me." His gaze held hers, and for the first time, he didn't argue. He just nodded, as if he finally understood. The storm outside had cleared by the time Zara stepped out of the hospital hours later. The streets glistened with rain, and the city stretched before her, alive, dangerous, full of possibility. Her life wasn't safe. Her heart wasn't settled. But she was no longer the woman running from debt collectors, powerless and desperate. She had survived Daejun, and she had survived herself. Now, the choice was hers. To stay in his dangerous love, or to walk into freedoms unknown. And that choice, terrifying, exhilarating, hers alone, was the beginning of her survival. The winter air in Seoul carried a crisp bite, the kind that made every breath feel sharp and alive. Zara stood at the edge of the Han River, the city lights dancing on the water like fragments of broken stars. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the same coat she had worn when she first stumbled into this life of debts, danger, and choices she never thought she would make. So much had changed since then. Behind her, footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. She didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. She already knew who it was. Still thinking of running away? Daejun's voice was quieter than it used to be, stripped of the iron edge it once carried. Zara smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed on the water. Maybe. Maybe not. He came to stand beside her, his dark coat blending with the night, his expression unreadable. The bandage beneath his shirt was healing, but the memory of blood on her hands still haunted her. He looked stronger now, but something in him had shifted too. His grip wasn't as suffocating anymore, though his presence was still heavy, still impossible to ignore. For a while, they stood in silence, the cold air wrapping around them, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. "Sometimes," Zara said softly, "I think about the girl I was when I came here. Scared, drowning in debt, chasing survival." She wouldn't recognize me now. Daejun's gaze lingered on her. That girl is gone. And the woman standing here, she's the one who survived me. Zara turned to him then, meeting his eyes. She saw the scars in them, the shadows of violence, the hunger for control. But she also saw something else, something fragile, almost human. She took a breath. I don't know what the future looks like for us. I don't even know if I can stay. Daejun's jaw tightened, but instead of arguing, he nodded slowly. Then don't promise me anything. Just don't disappear tonight. The simplicity of it broke something in her chest. No cages. No commands. Just a plea. Zara reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. She didn't lace them together. Not yet. But she didn't pull away either. The river flowed endlessly, just like time, carrying with it the weight of all they had been through. Their story wasn't neat, and it wasn't finished. It was messy, dangerous, terrifying, and alive. And for now, that was enough.